History records many scintillating stories of kingdoms where young sons rebel against their fathers, from Philip of Macedon and Alexander the Great to no less than King David and his son Absalom. Royal parents have had to deal with obstreperous young sons. Yet, this is an issue not unique to royal families. How many of you can recall a moment of frustration with your parents or a period of rebellion in your own youth? Indeed, we learn in this week's parashah, individuals have been at odds with their parents for a very, very long time. Exodus 21:17 reads, "Umekalel aviv ve'imo mot yumat." A standard Jewish translation is, "One who insults one's father or mother shall be put to death." Yikes. That seems rather extreme. If we take this at face value, yeah, I can see all the parents out there. Yeah, I have 3 kids too, and I'm like, yes. No, I'm just kidding. But if we were to take this verse at face value, I wonder how many of us would be sitting here right now. What exactly is going on with this verse? I will suggest tonight that the answer to 3 questions can help us unpack this law. First, what does the Hebrew word mikalel, to curse or to insult, actually mean? Second, what is the relationship between the individual and their father or mother? And third, in what social context does this verse make any sense? First, the definition of mikalel can mean a variety of things. In addition to insult, it can be translated as revile, dishonor, or to treat disgracefully. Each of these definitions falls within a basic range of the word. However, if we look at the root of the word, we find its primary definition is to curse. So the verse would read quite literally, "One who curses one's father or mother shall be put to death." And indeed, this is how many translations render the verse. We might ask then, what kind of curse is so bad that it brings about an individual's death? The medieval Spanish commentator Ibn Ezra notes that there are curses that invoke the name of God and curses that do not invoke the name of God. A famous midrash follows this line of reasoning, explaining that the individual in question invoked the holy name of God in their curse, and so they must die. Now, both of these explanations draw on other places in the Torah where people are put to death for cursing using God's name. However, neither of these rabbinic explanations are satisfactory, in my own opinion, because the situations they draw upon are not situations in which a person invokes God's name to curse their own parents. So we must look further. Looking at the relationship of the one cursing and their parents, we might ask whether this is a son or a daughter, and furthermore, how old the person is. The subject of the law is found in the word mikalel, which is a masculine verb, here's the academic, meaning the one who, yet this is not really helpful, because Hebrew often uses masculine forms to mean both male and female. So we are still left with the question of whether the verse means a son or a daughter. We might then ask, how old is this individual? The verse is set up to show power dynamics. The one with lesser power, the child, is cursing those with more power, the parents. It is addressing the classic parent-child relationship. Now, just Googling that phrase will pop up a myriad of websites that offer various keys to successfully parenting a child. Try typing in difficult child-parent relationship or child who curses parents, and you will see offerings from many a psychologist with advice on how to navigate difficult situations, especially when it comes to angsty teens. All this is to say, in contemporary culture, we are programmed to read this verse with our own preconceived notions of who is involved in a rocky parent-child relationship. One in which the child yells, insults, or even curses at their parents. And we probably understand this child to be a minor. Yet words like son and daughter, or mother and father, are relational terms rather than age-related terms. The individual with lesser power, the child, could, I suggest, actually be a minor or an adult. Well, I arrive at this conclusion from a purely sociological observation. Rashi arrives at this conclusion using grammar. He looks to other texts in the Bible as proof of this and finds another verse very similar to ours, which says, "If anyone insults father or mother, that person shall be put to death." And he looks at the word that says anyone, and he says, aha, we have the answer. It says ish, man. So Rashi states we should understand all minors are excluded and only adult males who curse their fathers shall be put to death. So from both a social and grammar perspective, we have answered at least one of the questions. The individual under investigation is an adult male. And now we arrive at the last question. What social situation would merit the death of an adult male who cursed or insulted father or mother? Here is where knowing a little bit about the world in which the text of Exodus arose can be helpful for decoding the meaning of the verse. While the Bible is certainly unique in its description of the Israelites and their religions, it was not created in a vacuum. One of my favorite quotes about the biblical texts comes from my colleague Christopher B. Hayes, who is also a professor of Hebrew Bible. He says that the Hebrew Bible is, quote, exceedingly respiratory. It breathes in the culture of its times, and it breathes it back out in a different form. Thus, comparing Torah with literature of other ancient Near Eastern cultures can help bring things into focus. We are constantly comparing things to make sense of the world. As Hayes, who is himself 6'3", says, in a first grade classroom, he's tall, but in an NBA locker room, he's short. Comparisons matter. Here is where I think a comparison with a society that was near to ancient Israel is helpful. The ancient port city of Ugarit lay to the north of Israel. It is in Syria, just west of modern-day Aleppo. There, a major archive of texts was found in 1928. One of the many texts was a collection of wills. The documents were standardized, drawing upon a template of formal legalese. Most of them sound like the one I'm about to describe. This particular will says, if a son will sue his mother in court or curses his mother, I picked mother because, for my own kids, he shall pay 500 shekels of silver to the king, place his cloak on the bolt of the door, and leave for the street. But whatever son honors his mother, she shall give him the inheritance. Now, Ugarit or Ugaritic is another Semitic language, meaning it is related to Hebrew. And the word used in the will for curse, ukalil, shares the same root as the Hebrew word mikalel. In the Ugaritic text, cursing is placed in contrast to honoring. And if you are wondering if the word for honor is similar to the Hebrew word for honor, you are correct. They both share the root kavod. To honor one's mother or father is not to curse them. Like the text in Exodus, the Ugaritic will is not addressing a minor, but a grown adult male. This male is to honor his mother. So how does one honor one's mother or father? In the ancient Near East, a place without governmentally subsidized elder care, the answer was by respecting them and taking care of them in their old age. If an adult male child did this, then they would be awarded their inheritance. Now, we are perhaps more familiar with the injunction to care for the widow, the orphan, and the poor. Yet this is the job of the king. But the job of caring for another marginalized group, aging parents, was to be the job of the adult son. So how does this will from you, Garrett, help us understand Exodus 21:17? Here is where we come back to that quote about how the biblical text is respiratory, breathing in the culture of its time and breathing it back out in a different form. In our text, disrespecting one's parents by cursing them was tantamount to thumbing their nose at their parents, saying, "Forget you. I am dissolving our relationship, and you're on your own in your old age." For the author of Exodus, this sort of attitude was not just a shanda, it was a major shanda. The biblical text breathes in the culture of its times. Respect for parents was mandatory, non-negotiable. In breathing it back out, the answer to what happens when you curse or refuse to show kavod is not a slap on the wrist. It is not, "You get disinherited." No. Here is where we see the distinct, unique nature of our tradition, situating itself as different than those around them. The answer is rather, "You shall surely die." While we might not agree with the extreme nature of the law, we might still adhere to the intent of the message. Namely, we are called to care for the elderly, which, as the Torah describes it, is a divinely appointed task. Today, care for the elderly can take many different forms, as each family works out for itself what form that might take. Whether it means financial care, practical hands-on care, or simply giving the gift of our time, we can find creative ways to help care. I hope that I have shown here tonight how paying attention to issues of children and families in the ancient world can help us unlock new meanings to our texts, and in this case, a rather troublesome text. And I look forward to continuing our conversation this weekend. Shabbat Shalom.